All right, time to pick up where we left off. The last clip you guys saw should have been putting the rods on. Now we had the last couple days, we had to do a couple other stuff. So we picked up the manifold, if you didn't see in the other video, the new wastegate exit and everything. But next thing to do would be put the oil pump on, as well as the windage tray and the pickup tube. So if we come over here, before we put the oil pump on, we need to make sure that all of the old RTV is off of there 100%, and we probably should have done that before, but just doing it right now. So we want to make sure that the surface is 100% clean first, with no residue of the old RTV or Honda bond, and then second with brake clean to make sure everything is degreased and 100% clean to go on the new RTV. Here's the oil pump we're going to be using. Genuine Honda Type R. There is no real Type R oil pump, for those of you who don't know. For OBD2, they are all the same. There's the part number you need, 15100P72A01. That's the good Honda OBD2 oil pump. And it comes with the front main seal already installed, nice and good. Before we actually install the oil pump, right in here, this is what makes it move, obviously. So this needs to go in a certain direction. So you want to make sure that your crank lines up with it before you put the RTV, because if not, then you'll find yourself struggling with it and probably mess up all your RTV. But you just got to make sure that it lines up. We're not going to push it in all the way because I don't want to put the seal on with my hand. But you basically want to line it up and make sure that your oil pump is in the correct location. The gears inside of it are ready to seat against the crank. You can see that's where it seats right there. That's where it seats as well on the other side. So you just want to make sure that it's placed correctly. And it doesn't matter which side of this it's on, it only fits on snug over it. We've got all our RTV cleaned off. I'm gonna spray it down with some brake clean. Make sure our sealing surface is nice and clean. With a fresh towel, wipe everything down. And make sure you don't get any rips in the towel, because then it'll leave a little bit of fuzzy residue. But most of the time for parts like this, you don't have a problem. And a lot of people overlook, I'm going to do the exact same thing, just I'm not spraying it directly on here, on the sealing surface of the oil pump. I'm gonna spray a little bit onto the towel. I just want to make sure that everything is nice and degreased on here, because sometimes there can be a little bit of grease in the packaging, and I don't want any of the sealing surface to have any contaminant. So I'm gonna spray that down right now, or spray the towel and clean this off as well. Before you actually put any of the RTV or the oil pump, I like to spray out the holes as well. And reason being, sometimes if you clean everything out and you don't do this, then as soon as you start putting the bolts in, you'll have debris or other things start coming out. Next thing you want to do is just blow into it. If you have an air compressor, even better. But as long as you get everything dry in there, you don't want for you to start threading and have liquid come out while you're threading in the bolts. Then make sure that you have all the correct bolts already in place over here, ready to go. So that way when we put the oil pump on, we know exactly that we are gonna put everything on at the same time. For this next part, you're gonna wanna use gloves, because you don't want any of the oil or contaminants from your fingers to get onto the RTV. You have two options that I recommend. Either use Ultra Gray or Honda Bond, depends whatever you feel is best. Honda Bond is wonderful, Ultra Gray is just as good. It kind of really comes down to it of what you have access to. What we're gonna do is put a bead of silicone around each bolt hole, as well as the surface right here, around that bolt hole as well. We're not gonna put any right here, because that is where the O-ring does its sealing. O-ring that goes right on the oil pump, right there. So there's no necessity for RTV right there. So we'll start putting that on, and then kind of just move it around with our finger, just to get the surface nice and flush. And then we'll put the oil pump on. We're just gonna drive the bolts in. We're not gonna tighten them all the way. I just want them to be finger tight, basically. Just a lot faster to do it like this. If you don't feel comfortable with an impact, do not do this by any means necessary. Just save a lot of time doing it like this. Another thing to keep in mind when you're putting the seal on of the front main, you want to make sure that it seats correctly so you won't have any leakage out the front, which actually I think I didn't seat mine correctly. So I'm going to take this off real quick. The RTV is still tacky, so we are still within a good time to do this. So I loosened up all the bolts because I was going to take the oil pump off, but I actually just pushed it back on with a little flathead, and I think we should be okay like that. I'm just making sure everything is nice and seated correctly. A lot of people overlook that, the seals, when they put the oil pump on. But as long as everything looks 100% flush all around it, you should be okay. Now, if I'm gonna tell you how I would recommend, then I would recommend that you take it off, make sure that the RTV is still good, as well as the seal is on there 100%. Basically, there's a lip on the inside that's a little bit tighter than the crank nose, so you wanna make sure that it seats up against the crank with pressure on the crank. That way it's, you know, doesn't leak anything out the front. But you also want to make sure that the seal is 100% sealing all around. I actually forgot one of the bolts. I'm going to pull it out of my pile right now. I have all the corresponding, but there's 3 right here, then 1 over here in this corner, and then 2 on the bottom. The 2 on the bottom are 12 millimeters. They're both long. And then these are kind of long, and they're 4 of the same type of 10s. You can see all around the oil pump, there's a little bit of RTV that is pinched out. So that's just from finger tightening everything. And that's a good sign because we want it to set in the area that it's going to be sealing. And since it's RTV, you need to let it set a little bit under finger tight and then do the final torque. I like to do it about 5 to 10 minutes later. Do it by ratchet and by feel. There's a torque specification for these, but mostly it's just ratchet tight, you know. Not anything crazy. If I had to say, it'd probably be maybe like 10 foot-pounds for the top ones, and the bottom ones that are 12s maybe do like 15 foot-pounds. I'll see if I can find the exact torque on it. But it's not a crazy thing that's gonna be losing it's torque like other items. You're just holding the oil pump onto the block. All right, now we're on the bottom of the block again. What we're going to be doing next is putting on the windage tray. If you're worried about how the direction of this goes, no problem. There's only one way it can, but a good indicator is the oil pickup goes in through this hole right here. And then you can have the openings for where the mains connect to the oil pickup. So this is gonna have, if I'm not mistaken, 6 bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bolts, then 2 nuts over here, 1 bolt right here and 1 bolt right here for the pickup. And for, this is our old pickup tube, but when our oil pump grenaded, we have pieces of metal stuck inside. So unfortunately, we're not gonna be using that. So I have this little ugly one that I'm gonna be utilizing. I know it looks pretty bad, but I'll probably end up buying a new one directly from Honda in the near future, or look into the other options. But for now, this is what we're running. This is gonna have 2 nuts right here for the pickup, as well as a bolt right there and a bolt right there. Before we put that on, we wanna make sure it's nice and clean on the bottom, as well as on the oil pump side as well. And that new gasket we were talking about goes right on there. So I'm just gonna set this on another time lapse and start putting that on. I've got the block off of the stand right now. We're gonna be doing the rear main seal. I'm just gonna be using my main seal that I already had on it, the rear main seal that I already had on it, because I only had about maybe 2,000–3,000 miles on it. Had no problem leaking. One thing that I did do was put some more grease onto where it fits over the back end of the crank, because you wanna make sure that it goes on there fine. And just like the front main seal comes with a little bit of grease over it, we wanna make sure that it goes on without having any leaking problems. We've got the surface over here all cleaned up, as well as on the plate that holds the rear main seal. And just like we did on the front, We're gonna be doing some Honda Bond all around, then finger tighten it, and then do the final torque on it. All right, we've got that tightened down, just enough for it to pinch out of there. I'm just gonna wipe it off because every time that you put an oil pan gasket, you're supposed to put a dab of Honda Bond on there anyway. Same went for the oil pump. So then that'll make the fresh seal each time. And we're just gonna let this sit for about 5 minutes like we did the front, and then tighten it down by the ratchet. You can see a little bit right here is the grease that we use that's protruding, which is perfect. The seal on this side is sealing perfectly, so we shouldn't have any problems on the back end. La Fea SP Tuning. SP Tuning. All right, now we got everything on the bottom end all assembled. The only thing left to do is put the oil pan along with the oil pan gasket. This is the gasket that I'm gonna be using. It's Felpro's newer gasket. It's made with a solid steel core, and I actually have another video of me installing this on one of my old cars. I think it's a wonderful gasket. If I'm not mistaken, they say it's reusable as well. Only thing I can't think about really is the RTV that you have to put onto those 4 corners. I can't really find a way to take it off without ruining the gasket. So I got it cleaned up very well, the grease and everything. And I'm just gonna kind of take the chances with it and let you guys know if it holds up for reusing on this method. So we're gonna be putting our RTV right here, right there, and right there. Basically the 4 corners of where the seals got pressed against the block. And I still have some Honda Bond left that we're gonna be using right there. And before I do that, I'm just gonna get all the bolts located. That way we can immediately put it on there and tighten it all down. You don't need a lot on this. I just put a little dab right there and then let it cover both sides. And do that to all 4 corners. Okay, now we've got all of them sat down, all of the bolts and nuts. Now we're going to follow the torque sequence. And I'm not looking at it right now, but roughly you just gotta do side by side. Just like with anything, do like a circle pattern outwards. Or something close to it. It's not as important with this specific oil pan gasket because like I said, this one is the one with the steel core inside. So as long as you just get even pressure everywhere, it doesn't bulge, it always keeps good torque everywhere. But I'll put a picture right here to show you how to do the torque sequence on the original gaskets or the non-steel core gaskets. All right guys, that pretty much sums up the video for today. The block's all finished, all put together, as well as the bottom end, oil pump, main seal, rear main seal, all that good stuff. We are finished for the day. My buddy's anniversary is today, so I'm gonna help him surprise his wife for a couple things. But yeah, if you have any questions about the build, just leave them down in the comment section below. As always, I'll probably do a video next couple days on putting the head on, as well as the new intake manifold that we have for it, and actually going ahead and finishing the build and putting it back in the car. So if you guys have any questions, just like I said, leave it down in the comment section below. Hit that like button because we really appreciate it. If you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe and notification, guys. Thank you very much, and stay tuned for more.